Whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're thrilled to have all of you join us for our GT Family Learning Night, our last one of this school year, with our guest speaker, Julie Skolnick.
Hi, everybody.
So, we do have a few guidelines, just simple ones. Please make sure your camera is turned off, your microphones are muted. Our sign up form allowed for questions to be submitted to Julie prior to this presentation. So at the end, Julie's going to address as many of these questions as possible. You might also want to ask questions using the chat. These questions will go directly to all of us co hosts and will be shared at the end if time permits. Also, please feel free to reach out to your GT resource teacher. This will be found on our new website, which you're going to learn about, if you have any questions about a school or a specific student. This is our new website. We're pretty proud of it. Hopefully, everybody will find the new ease of it and the transition from our old website. We do have a lot of information on here. Please feel free to go ahead and take a look around. If you need more information after this, you can find your resource teacher or your GT counselor at the bottom of the main page. Also, we have a wonderful message from our Jefferson County Association for Gifted Children, JAGC President Catherine Rickard.
Catherine Rickard, President of Jefferson County Association for Gifted Children. I have been actively involved with JAGC for over 10 years. JAGC was established over 20 years ago as a parent advocacy group. While we have a close relationship with the district, we act independently. We are parents helping parents. We provide our community with a monthly newsletter during the school year and maintain an informative website. Our extended efforts over the last several years have been towards providing resources to parents with 2E kids, continually working with the district on consistency in GT programming in neighborhood schools, and working with the district on making secondary ALPs meaningful and manageable. We are here to help. So if you or anyone you know could use some guidance from parents who have been through it, please reach out to us at info@jeffcogifted.org. Thank you. Hello, I'm Catherine Rickard, President of Jefferson County.
So here's a little bit more information about what JAGC does and what it can do for you. Their focus is to ensure consistency. They offer education outreach for schools, educate the Board of Education, understand and support twice exceptional students, support JEFCO in the ALP process, work with communication and resources for families, provide social emotional support for families as well. They have some amazing successes. They advocate for high school credit for some middle school students. They secured additional GT center seats across the district, ensured district accommodated GT center for sixth graders moving to middle school, worked with the Colorado Department of Education to implement GT needs in the Every Student Success Act. They were very instrumental in establishing Jeffco and Colorado's first GT center at a high school program with Wheat Ridge High School. And also, they continue to work with Jeffco to bring uniform programming for all students with ALPs. So we appreciate your time. Now we would like to welcome Julie Skolnick.
Hi, thanks, guys. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm happy to introduce myself. I am the founder of With Understanding Comes Calm. And through that service, I guide and support parents. I mentor 2E adults. I train lots of teachers all over the world. And I work with clinicians and practitioners in how to bring out the best and raise self-confidence in 2E kids. I also am the author of this book, Gifted and Distractible, which is 6 months and 1 day old today. And I also, and this is the most important fact, I raised 3 awesome, twice exceptional kids. So today, let me share my screen. Okay, and there we go. All right. So we're going to talk about understanding and managing transitions for twice exceptional kids. So why am I dedicating an entire talk to transitions? Well, first of all, Does anybody know a 2E kid who struggles with transitions? Anybody not know a 2E kid who struggles with transitions? Anybody know a 2E kid who demonstrates some rigidity at times or a lot of rigidity a lot of times? So this talk is aimed to help you understand why rigidity is often part of the 2E profile and how to support our 2E kids and maybe our 2E selves as we struggle with expected and unexpected change. So, as our friends at Jeffco said, I am going to entertain questions at the end of this conversation, of this presentation, but I am really all about building community. So, the way that I encourage building community when I speak virtually is to really encourage you to be active in chat. If I say something and you're like, yeah, right on, put it in the chat. If I say something, you're like, doesn't resonate with me, note it in the chat. It's really important. When I finish presenting, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to start scanning through that chat and answering questions. And I really want you to be able to feel like you're part of a community right now. I also am a very visual learner, so my slides will have things that sort of appear, words that appear. So if you're able to look at the screen while you're sitting at home eating your dinner or whatever you're doing, that would be great. If you're at home and you need to stand up and walk around because we're asking you to sit for 45 minutes, do it. Get up, move around, do whatever you have to do to attend. And by the way, that's me role modeling for you messages that are really good to give to your 2E kids. All right. So let's get started and talk about understanding and managing transitions for twice exceptional kids. Do you find yourself in this position ever? You're asking, you're begging, you're cajoling, you're bribing, right? Sometimes, because twice exceptionality is genetic, we might have a parent who's stuck, who's black and white or feeling rigid, who's parenting a rigid child. So I had a client actually this morning, and one of the goals that we're talking about is how to help her 9-year-old kiddo be less rigid. He's really stuck on fairness. Things have to be fair, that rightness and justness, which is so beautiful, but sometimes gets stuck. Well, she was sharing an anecdote with me of something that he did, and she looked at her other child and said, well, that wasn't very fair. And so after she told me the anecdote, I gently went back and said, I think there might be a dynamic happening here. There's a pattern happening here. And that happens all the time. And there's no shame and there's no judgment. There's only noticing so that we can maybe change patterns. So if you're struggling with transitions, and I'm guessing you're here because you are, maybe some of the things that we're going to talk about are going to resonate and help you understand there might be a way to tweak some of your actions, your language as you speak with your 2E child, your 2E student, your 2E self, your 2E client. Okay. So I brought up rigidity a lot. Rigidity means having a hard time accepting different ways of doing things or just going with the flow. That's not how we would describe a 2E kid usually, or a gifted kid. We wouldn't really say, yeah, they go with the flow. So chill. Yeah. So to address rigidity, we need a delicate balance of structure and flexibility. Again, it's really important to have structure, but if you have too much structure, and we have sensory sensitive kids, sometimes all those transitions, all those things that we have to do, they're too much. And we're just not going to be successful. It's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy to have too much structure, too much rigidity with a rigid person. So this requires a reframe to understand that your child or your student doesn't actually want to cause difficulty, does not want to be annoying, does not want to cause you stress. Sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we forget how much this is neurological for our kids, and giving them the benefit of the doubt goes a very long way. But you're saying to yourself right now, Julie, how can I do this when I just need to get out the door? How can I do this when we need to switch classes? How can I do this when we need to switch and do another activity, right? So if you're thinking those things, go ahead, put it in the chat because somebody else is thinking those things too. It's hard to find empathy when you have things you need to get done or when you feel like the challenge is making everything unnecessarily complicated, right? Do you think this sentence in your head all the time? If they would just, and then you fill in the blank. It wouldn't be so hard if they would just. We could do so many fun things if they would just. Right? Okay. No, really, I don't spy on you in your home. I just live it and work it all day, every day. Okay. So, as is often the case with 2E people, perspective is key. The 2E person often doesn't realize how different their experience in the world is than their neurotypical peers. When parenting or teaching a 2E child, it's often hard for us to perceive their reality. So perspective goes two ways. It's hard to know how I'm affecting other people, and it's hard for other people to understand how they're affecting me. So let's start with debunking any assumptions about what is a transition. So the definition of a transition, pretty simple. Anytime you go from one activity or state of mind to another. There's growth with big transitions, that's for sure. Like a new school, a new home. A lot of people submitted questions, the same question. What do I do about my kid transitioning from elementary to middle school? That's a big transition. A new grade, or transitions can be a large life disruption, a divorce, a death, an illness. All of these are transitions, and even small events can be transitions, like waking up. You're transitioning from being asleep, coming to dinner, re-entering class after recess, switching subjects in school. They're all transitions. It's almost easier to say, or harder to say what's not a transition. Okay, so please make sure you're watching the screen because there'll be a cute little thing that happens in a second. So what's the definition of a transition for a 2E person? A transition I use the word may, mean leaving a comfort zone, leaving something familiar and requiring minimal effort or perceived risk and going to a different state or status. Oh, look at that little fish. Okay, I hope you're laughing. This change can actually be steeped in fear based on feelings of discomfort from sensory overload or the unknown, fear, not feeling very like you can trust, you've been burned before. The implication of this little fish leaving its familiar group and heading out alone is one type of transition. But guess what? For other people, it could be jumping into that large group that's really uncomfortable. That's also a transition. So are we leaving comfort and going someplace else? Are we leaving lots of busyness and going someplace, that's a good transition? Or are we going from this solitude into lots of noise? So we have to think of it. Transitions very much are wrapped up in sensory input and output. So you're going to see two slides now. One is going to be transitions at home and one will be transitions at school. What's considered a transition at home besides everything, right? So sometimes we think of transitions, difficult transitions, when we're expected to go from high interest to low interest. So transitions at home may be weekend to weekday. I mean, there's a reason why people hate Mondays. There's a whole song about hating Mondays, probably more than one. Going from being awake to going to sleep is a really hard transition. Our 2E kids tend to have what's called, and our 2E adults tend to have what's called monkey mind. All of a sudden, things are calm, and then things get loud in my head. Going from being asleep to being awake. Time with one parent to time with the other parent, or, and this is really fascinating, I've had clients who describe their children as infants as having a very hard time with both parents in the room. As soon as the other parent would come in the room, the baby would melt down. I have clients with older kids who they have a real hard time. They sit between their parents. They don't want their parents together. They can't deal with that kind of triangulation. Transitioning to or from a meal, getting off a screen. Anybody want to put the word truth in chat right now? Because getting off a screen is like World War III. Having a new babysitter, going to or from a play date, really hard. Sometimes kids just dig their heels in. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And then they get there and I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave. Right? Going outside, coming inside. Now this next bullet is the, going from high interest to low interest is going from playtime to chores. And sometimes we actually have to think about the timing. Timing is relevant for a transition. So it's not such a jarring transition. Going to a vacation, coming back from a vacation, between seasons. So that's why that graphic is there, because there's something called seasonal affective disorder, or aptly acronymed as SAD. Some people really have a hard time, and it's not just to winter or less sun. It can be into springtime, summertime, not just because of allergies. It can be summertime because of vacation and less structure. And then, of course, if there's a death in the family or a death of a pet, that's a very big transition. Okay, so what's a transition at school besides everything? Again, from high interest to low interest sometimes. So moving between classes, moving to a new grade, we just talked about that, or moving to a different segment, right? From elementary to middle, from middle to high school, moving to a new school, entering or exiting if you have GT enrichment classes or specifically self-contained gifted program. Entering or exiting from a support situation, a pull out, a push in, a special class, having a new teacher, having a substitute teacher, listening or watching to working, to and from desk work. That can be a very big transition. To or from recess is a really hard transition. To or from lunch. And for older kids in college, having a roommate, that's a pretty big transition. And by the way, as we enter into camps season, same thing. Okay, so why is it hard for 2E kids and adults to transition? Well, it has to do with the profile. So if you've ever heard me speak before, or you're reading Gifted and Distractible, you might know about this image that's on the screen. This is my 3-layer cake of giftedness. So the frosting, which is about this thin, is above, around, between all the layers, and it stands for the assumption of gifted. That gifted means smart. It begins and stops with this idea of intellect. Well, notice that's represented by the frosting or the icing. It's above, around, between all the layers. It's about this thick, but then you got these 3 thick layers or characteristics, and they are asynchronous development, perfectionism, and intensities, are what's known in gifted parlance as overexcitabilities, or you see it sort of shortcut there as OEs. Now, any of the terms that I talk about during this talk that you want to know more about, like I promise you, if you Googled overexcitabilities, you get pages and pages and pages of results. You can also go to withunderstandingcomescalm.com and search any of these terms. I've been writing a blog a month since 2014. So there's a lot I've written about. And if you find something that I haven't written about, please email me and let me know so that I can write about it. Okay, so let's unpack this cake. Asynchronous development. I want you to think about this image on the screen with the 3-ring Venn diagram, where we have our intellectual part of ourself, our social emotional part of ourself, and our physical part of ourself. This is actually how I draw a human, right? That's what makes us human, those 3 things. All during the day, we're calling upon those 3 different areas. And in some ways, we may be wildly beyond, we being the 2E person, might be wildly beyond our age and stage, and in other ways, wildly chronologically below our age and stage or abilities, right? So right now, you're all sitting there and, it's 6 o'clock for you, or a little bit after, and you're having to call upon your intellect to really process what I'm talking about, related to other things, think about how it's affecting you, which, by the way, socially and emotionally may be triggering. This morning this afternoon, I did one of my master classes, and the first person to unmute at the end said, I'm feeling really emotional right now because I feel really seen, right? So you're managing your social emotional self and your physical self. Remember at the beginning, I said, get up, walk around, do what you got to do to attend, right? So in different ways, you may be more advanced or struggling in some of these areas. And all during the day, our kids, our students, ourselves are struggling with these three areas. And this asynchrony feels like a seesaw, like a yo-yo, and it's confusing to us, confusing to for our kids themselves, the grown-ups who work with them and love them. Oftentimes our 2E kids hear, why can you do this, but you can't do that? I like to say easy things are hard and hard things are easy for our gifted and 2E kids. Another way to think about asynchronous development is the 5-10-15 rule, where you might be 10 chronologically, 15 in some superpower, and 5 somewhere else, which could be a learning difference or a social emotional challenge. There are different rates of regulation for our 2E kids in their attention, their mood, and their behavior. And by the way, executive functioning skills are completely wrapped up in those three things. I give an entire talk on executive functioning, and I talk about regulating attention, mood, and behavior. That's what executive functioning skills do for us. So if you're weak in your executive functioning skills, there's an enormous asynchrony there. That second layer in the layer cake is perfectionism. Our kids are told from almost the time they're born how smart they are, how capable they are, how amazing they are at surpassing expectations. And at some point, they can't meet expectations, but they know there are high expectations. They have high expectations for themselves. My biggest entry for clients is 3rd grade, 6th grade, 8th grade, and 11th grade. That's when big transitions happen. That's when things get hard, right? And so if I can't do this the way I want to or the way I know others expect me to, why try? I can't get what's in my head down on paper in writing. I can't get what's in my head down on paper in a picture or in a project. So then imposter syndrome sets in. When I doubt myself, oh, I really must not be gifted. That can't really be actual. That must have been just a fluke. And anxiety occurs and paralysis, where we have people who use deficit language saying the person's lazy, the person's not trying, the person's not motivated, when really it's the person is afraid. The person isn't sure what to do. The person's having a hard time trusting the environment. The third layer in our layer cake is overexcitabilities, or as you saw, OEs. I could give and do give an entire talk on overexcitabilities. And so I'm just going to kind of give you, because why are we talking about these three layers again? Does everybody remember? Because we're talking about why are transitions hard. Okay, so overexcitabilities are probably the most relevant. Overexcitabilities appear in one or more of 5 areas. They're listed on the bottom of the screen of this slide. Intellectual overexcitability, emotional, imaginational, sensual, or you can think of it as sensory and psychomotor. So those 5 words, think about them and the 2E person you're thinking about, and either they are coming to the world very intensely, that intellectual overexcitable person who asks a million questions or gets totally lost in thought and completely hyper-focused, the emotionally overexcitable person, you're giving off this intensity, but you also might be affected by it. So the emotionally overexcitable person who really has deep empathy and it has existential considerations that they are so aware of, right? The world affects them in an intense way. They affect the world in an intense way. Imaginationally, the same thing. They need to be able to draw or doodle in order to be able to attend. Sensual overexcitability, either sensory seeking or sensory avoiding. We dial up or we dial down the sensory input for those folks. And psychomotor overexcitability, people who need to move to learn. So when we think of these 5 areas, the important thing to remember is if you are a person who has this superpower, and overexcitabilities, by the way, tends to sound negative when in fact it's not over too much. It's this incredible ability. I really call it superpowers, but it can get in the way of a lot of things. And if you're not aware, that not everybody around you has overexcitabilities or that ability that you have, then you feel out of sync. You feel different. You may feel like you give more attention than you get. And that can affect you in a whole bunch of different ways, not the least of which are transitions. All right. So, what are the results of this 2E profile characteristics? Well, we're going to see rigidity, that black and white thinking, right? You're going to be protecting yourself. The perfectionism, the overexcitabilities, feeling that asynchrony, you're going to stay in your area of strength. You're going to resist things that are hard. If the environment isn't appropriate for you, there's this sensory sensitivity, obviously, because that is from our sensual overexcitability. Emotion regulation challenges, yet another topic I give an entire talk about. I have the Skolnick process for emotion regulation. Emotion dysregulation is a thing, and it makes sense. Think about it. You are whatever age you are. I don't care if you're 5 or 75. If you are asynchronous, it's frustrating. If you are feeling triggered and you go into your amygdala and you're in a fight or flight mode in that primitive feeling brain, it's really hard to get into that prefrontal cortex thinking brain. Anxiety comes along with this. I really don't know and have really never worked with a client who doesn't have a 2E child who also has anxiety. It comes with it because think about it. I'm called with understanding comes calm. With misunderstanding comes chaos. And that tends to be the reality. So the perfectionism, the needing to be in control, that's a total response to anxiety. Processing speed is often a diagnosis that co-occurs with giftedness because actually the person notices so much more than the average person. So if you're crunching more data like that, just like a computer, it's going to take longer. So I never say slow processing speed. I say deep processing speed. And by the way, wouldn't I rather have my lawyer, my accountant, or my doctor definitely thinking outside the box and considering all the data, right? Working memory, because you have more to hold in your mind. It's harder to remember all of those things and be able to hold it and then shift and use that information. And attention challenges, because if you're bored, you got way more things that your brain is going to focus on. And we already talked about executive functioning challenges. Okay, so think about these vis-a-vis transitions. So people sometimes ask me this question: are transitions difficult because you're transitioning from something you want to do to something you don't want to do? Well, the easy answer to that is yes. But the actual answer is not always. I've had clients who are going to do something with their child or their student that they've always been interested in. But for some reason, transitioning today is hard. They dig their heels in. I had a client they always went on ski vacations. Their kids loved skiing. They got to the ski VRBO, and the kid dug his heels in that morning. I was like, nope, not going. And it was like, mom was dumbfounded because the kid loves to ski. There are sometimes transitions happen or become a difficulty because of other things happening, too much noise happening in the child's head, too many things that they're managing or trying to organize or feeling out of control about. So this is not a diagnosis in the US. It comes from the UK. You can read really interesting and helpful information from the citation that I have on this slide. Pathological demand avoidance, or PDA, is defined as the characteristic of a persistent and marked resistance to the demands of everyday life, which may include essential demands such as eating and sleeping, as well as expected demands such as going to school or work. And by the way, I don't know why they didn't put toileting, but that's another one. It's a profile where it's almost just because you're asking me to, I can't. I purposely didn't say I won't, because that sounds very judgy, like I'm doing it on purpose, I'm manipulative, and that's never the situation. This is a neurological thing that's happening for a child. Children don't want to be difficult. This for sure, I know. So sometimes there are different kinds of demands, right? There's that direct asking a question, empty the dishwasher. Will you empty the dishwasher? Can you empty the dishwasher? It's time for you to empty the dishwasher. Indirect or implied, sort of an expectation that after dinner, I'm supposed to take my plate off the table, or an internal demand, all those bodily needs. So that's where we can see demand avoidance, and it has to do with transitioning. It has to do with anxiety. And there are ways to respond, giving choices, not asking direct questions. We're going to go through some of these in a minute. So what are the responses that we see when we're asked to transition, or when we ask our child or our student to transition? Withdrawal, like just that, it going internal. I'm not even going to engage with my parent or teacher. Refusal, digging your heels in. I'm just not going to do this. Negotiation, where you're just using all the words to try to delay. And then straight up anger happens. These are typical responses when a transition is hard or scary. So here's the truth. When transitions trigger your child or your student, you can anticipate there's going to be challenging behavior. So it's really important to try to notice and keep data on when transitions are hard, because hope springs eternal. But I promise you, if what you tried yesterday didn't work and you tried it again today and it didn't work, it is not going to work tomorrow. So we got to change up the response. And here's the other thing. Challenging behavior likely triggers you. And again, if you are a parent, this is all genetic. So the greatest button pushers are people who are like you. So that might be happening. So you have to ask yourself, how can I anticipate and plan? Well, remember I just said to keep data. This is a chart that I give to clients. It's also, there are 25 worksheets in the back of Gifted and Distractible, and this is one of them. And this is a behavior assessment. You start noticing, like, when does this behavior happen? When is it hard? Is it with a certain person in a certain place? Has my kid eaten? Have I eaten? How long? What changed the behavior? How long did it take? This helps you to actually really be able to anticipate, which is the key to addressing any challenging behavior durably. So we want to break the cycle. We know fight or flight happens when there's a trigger or transition. We know when fight or flight happens, then the adult tends to ratchet up the expectation, and then there's a reaction. So we need to break that cycle, because otherwise it's like stepping into quicksand. That adult-child dynamic leads to a quick downward spiral. And I promise you, and I didn't put a slide in here on this, but if you can imagine a bell curve, we have the rage bell curve, right? At the top of the bell curve, that's when the behavior is happening. Nothing's going to change at that point. You're not going to teach. You're not going to change behavior. It has to happen anticipatorily on the way up to that apex, or afterwards looking back. So we wonder what to do. Well, I like to say life begins at the end of your comfort zone, and transitions that are difficult are definitely going from a comfort zone. So I want you to remember that this hard work is worth it, because this is what life's all about. So what do we do? I have devised the 5 C's to address transition troubles: connection, concern, collaboration, creativity, and clarity. So let's go through them. Connection. The number one thing always is a personal connection. I have clients who say to me, okay, well, what can we expect? Like, when will this phase change? And I'm always saying, go back to the personal connection. That's the first thing you have to do, is spend time where this child knows that you get them, that you like them, that you're interested in them. The amount of one-on-one time you can spend. And if you have multiple children and multiple students, I get it. But carving out the 15 minutes once a week to just ask this kid what makes them tick and what ticks them off goes a very long way, just to show that you're interested in them. It fosters this feeling of understanding and of trust, because remember, we talked about trust. When we can gain trust, then our kids can take risks. So, how do we show concern? I'm a very big believer in behavior is communication. It's not manipulative. It's not purposeful to make your life difficult. Behavior is communication. Something's going on. So, what do? We show concern, we show empathy. We consider what is going on for this kid more than how they're behaving. In the moment, it's very hard. So to change behavior, as I've said before. So you have to be really aware, hence the behavior assessment chart. Oh, we're going to have this transition today. I know this is going to be hard. So let me think about it. Let me talk to the child. By the way, I'm always saying to parents, you work way too hard. Most of the answers lie within your 2E kid. Identify what's happening, say what's going to make this easier, what's going to help, ask questions and actively listen to them. And sometimes you just need to give space. Let me tell you a great anecdote. So I was working with this client once. She was describing to me how she was so excited because she got her child into this really cool enrichment online course. It was during COVID. And her child's very introverted, didn't have a lot of friends. She was worried about her. And the child really was actively involved in this online course. And she heard her from her office, one door over, engaged, and she was so excited. And after that course ended, her daughter walked into her office and mom said, "Hey, I heard you on your course. How'd it go?" And the child said, "It was fun, but I don't think I want to do it again." Mom was floored. Thankfully, we were working together and she knew to give space. She didn't say anything. She said, "Oh, okay." Child walked out of the office. 20 minutes later, walked in and said, "If I wanted to take the course, could I?" If mom had been like, "What are you talking about? I heard you. You were having so much fun. You engaged. You did this. You did that. Of course you wanted. Why would you not?" All of that pushes our kids who have difficulty with transitions or who have PDA to really dig in heels. They need space. And because 2E people, it's all genetic, parents of 2E kids tend to have a lot of vocabulary and words that they can use. That's sometimes the hardest thing. And the best thing is to limit the words when your kid is having a hard time transitioning. They need, it's like the snow globe is shaking up in their head and they need some space and room and time for it to settle so they can feel like they can do something. Giving them the benefit of the doubt. They don't want this to be difficult and validating them. And remember, concern is different than control. It's not you saying, "Well, here's what we're going to do and here's how you're going to do it." But actually giving space for them to work through and come to it at their very different time frame than we would like or prefer or be able to do ourselves. So I kind of love this slide. What Chico Xavier said, "Though nobody can go back and make a new beginning, anyone can start over and make a new ending." The reason why I have that here is because you might be thinking, "Oh, bummer. I messed that up. I messed that up. I messed that up. I've ruined my kid." No, 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 no. First of all, I always say to my clients, there's no room for a rear view mirror. Nobody even uses them in cars anymore. We have backup cameras. So stop looking in your rear view mirror. Look forward. New beginning. That's where we're going. All right. So how about collaboration? Collaboration means that we work with our 2E kid. Like I said, we're working too hard. We need to fold them into the process. So warnings aren't always enough. Like, this is gonna happen in 5 minutes. We all do that. And sometimes you're like, "Well, I gave him a 5-minute warning and it didn't work." Well, sometimes they're not enough. Sometimes we have to anticipate. Boy, I notice every time, if a teacher's thinking, every time we transition to music class, Johnny melts down. First of all, my first question would be, what's going on with Johnny's auditory processing? Who are the kids? How proximal do they have to stand? How loud is it? Like, all of those questions I would wonder. And so I might sit down with Johnny and I might say, "Hey, sometimes when we go to music class, it seems like it gets hard." Notice how hard I tried not to use judgmental. I didn't say you melt down, you behave poorly, you have a hard time. I didn't say any of that stuff. So how do we how do we elicit from Johnny what's going on for him? How do we ask questions and actively listen to collaborate with him to find out what he needs? And then front loading your child with information, asking what will help. Here's what's coming up today. And then maybe you do like a little sidebar with Johnny and you say, hey, I'm wondering, is there anything that might help right before we go to music class or during music class? Anything you wish the music teacher knew? Right. And you can do that in any scenario. And then let them help you with the planning. Let them decide how to communicate or what they'll do or make a suggestion. I'd really like to stand on the risers all the way in the back at the end. So I'm only standing next to one person. So be prepared and be flexible, because even if you set up the greatest, you're prepared, you anticipate, there's always that time when your great intervention expires. Has anybody had a really great strategy and it worked for like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Usually those are externally motivated strategies, which I'm not always, it's not my favorite thing, not my first thing to go to. But oftentimes when we have external motivation, we have to change it up because our kids get bored or they figure it out. So same thing for strategies for transitions. We may have to regroup and ask more questions and change it up again. Collaboration, another reason why it's so important is because getting the child's buy-in allows you to have solutions that actually stick. And role model your own tough transitions. Oh my gosh, today I had to be in this conference room and the lights were like humming and I looked around and nobody seemed to even notice. And it was really hard for me to say something, but I knew if I didn't say something, I was just going to get really irritated. And it was really funny because when I mentioned the lights, everybody started nodding. So I became the hero, just to go through certain things. Or, man, it was so hard for me to get up today. And I decided to think inside my head all the reasons why I needed to get up. And I decided that was way more important than not getting up. Whatever you can role model your thinking process, executive functioning for your child or your student. Okay, this illustration is actually from Gifted and Distractible, and it's talking about avoiding power struggles. So if we play tug of war together, and this is really funny to do this because usually I can at least see like little tiny pictures of people along, but I can't see you at all. So for all I know, I'm talking to myself. No, I know I'm talking to you. Okay, so just humor me. I want to play tug of war with you, which means you have to hold your invisible rope. Hopefully you're looking at your screen and you can see me. I'm holding my invisible rope and I'm going to pull you toward me. Come on, come toward me. Pull me toward you. Oh yeah, I'm going to pull you toward me. Now pull me toward you and I'm going to drop the rope. That's the visual I want you to have when you feel yourself going into a power struggle with your child. Sometimes that power struggle is unintended, but a way to protect themselves because they're avoiding something by causing drama in a different way. Does that make sense? So by making a power struggle, by getting into it, by refusing and yelling and all those pictures that I've already put up on the screen, they actually don't have to transition because they're doing something different. And they don't mean to do that. It's not manipulative. It's a fight or flight response. So don't play into that. Don't just drop the rope. All right. How about creativity? So I love strength-based solutions and positively reframing. And so if you can be creative, awesome. Use humor. Man, my kids, when they were little, they're now 23, 21, and 15. When they were little, remembering their shoes, that transition in the morning to get to the car, those last 60 seconds, oh my goodness, gray hairs. So I used to yell and cajole and bribe and threaten. And you know what I ended up doing, guys? I ended up creating the silliest song and making a total fool of myself and singing it every morning. And my kids ate it up. To this day. Sometimes they'll say, you want to sing the Put Your Shoes On song? Come up with outside the box ideas. Distract. You're trying to, let's say, transitioning to brushing your teeth. If brushing their teeth is really hard for them. So you distract them. This is something I call creating a wake. So if you think of a wake behind a boat, right? It just grabs everything and all the things come along within the wake. Well, create a wake. In other words, instead of saying time to brush your teeth, 5 minutes, and then we'll brush our teeth, or however we say it, instead, have at the ready, Google dad jokes. have a joke, start telling it as you're walking up the stairs to your child. That's creating a wake. You're grabbing them with you. Go upstairs, grab your toothbrush and brush your teeth with your child while you're telling them the joke, because they want to hear the rest of the joke or the story or the current event or the thing that they're interested in. Be creative. Use their strengths and yours. So if they're visual, draw the schedule, ask them to find pictures on the internet or take pictures of them doing the thing, and have them with their glue stick creating that visual schedule. Use a sticky note instead of using words. So let's say you've got a kid who transitions off of a screen and it's like a nightmare. You write on the sticky note, happen to have them right here, I have them all around me. You write 5 minutes till dinner. And you just hand that sticky note. You are lessening the sensory input. If they're auditory learners, make up a song, just like I talked about, or connect a schedule to music. Have them make a playlist. You know, a song is about 3 minutes long. Morning routine's a nightmare because of all the transitions. Let music transition them. Let them know that the first song is the get out of bed and brush your teeth song, and the next song is the get dressed and go downstairs song, and the next song, and have them make their morning playlist. If they're kinesthetic and they're having a hard time transitioning, and you see them going up that bell curve, sorting is an unbelievable way to settle the limbic system. Sorting Legos, beads, or even beans. Those dried kidney beans, red and white kidney beans, great thing to sort. They're cool to the touch. They make a nice plinky sound. They're easy to sort. And going out into nature is a really great way to be creative about helping your child get out of that amygdala into the prefrontal cortex so that a transition isn't as hard. And then 5 senses. This is a great strategy. You can do this outside. You know, I one time remember I was transitioning to bedtime for my now 15-year-old who was, I think, 3 at the time, and he was freaking out. And I just walked outside and I said, "What do you hear?" And he was like, "No, I don't hear anything." And then he was like, "A dog barking." And you have to use your prefrontal cortex to notice the 5 senses. What do you smell? What do you hear? What do you taste? Right? You can do it at bedtime too. I hear somebody emptying the dishwasher. I smell dinner. I taste my toothpaste. These are great ways to get kids out of their primitive brain and into their thinking brain. And I just put up on the screen, sticky notes are magical, because I cannot underscore that enough. That is a serious hack, the sticky note communication strategy. Okay, clarity. Oh man, you've got to know what the triggers are. You've got to have clarity around the triggers. So collect that data, know what they need by collaborating with them, and then make expectations clear so they know exactly what they're supposed to do. Tonight, we're meeting Grandma for dinner for her birthday. Sometimes I think the restaurant's kind of loud. What do you think will help you? Okay, you said sound canceling headphones. Great idea. My expectation is that you will bring your sound canceling headphones and you will put them on before we get to the restaurant. And when you walk into the restaurant, you'll say hello directly to Grandma, right? Because you know your kid's going to be kind of anxious about the loudness, right? Set them up for success. Make sure your expectations are clear. And then this is the last strategy I'm going to give, but it's called finding verbs. This is my secret sauce. There are no magic bullets, but there is secret sauce, and it's finding verbs. The way we find verbs is first we identify the behaviors we want to encourage. I want my child to be able to get their backpack together, get outside the door, get into the car. I want to make those expectations clear. So if it's in your family, it's okay to watch a screen if you're done eating and you're ready to go. What does that mean, ready to go? Does it mean your shoes are on? Does it mean that your backpack is ready? Make sure those expectations are clear. And then once they do that, that's the finding verbs. Notice all the efforts. When they do the expected behavior, the best way to encourage them to continue that behavior is by noticing all of their efforts. So we're going to say things like, "Hey, I saw this morning you went and you got your shoes out of the closet. You put them on before you sat down. You made sure your backpack had your lunch in it. And then when it was time to go, you put your backpack on, you walked out the door. Do you see how much better that how much better that is than just saying, "Hey, thanks for getting ready this morning"? This way, the child is feeling as though their efforts are really noticed. The reason why this is so impactful, guys, is because we know that twice exceptional students are redirected 40 times more than neurotypical students in a typical classroom. So what that means is by noticing and finding verbs, you're doing the opposite. You're noticing all the efforts that they're making. And by the way, just to round out this strategy, I always say to my clients, avoid saying thank you or I'm proud of you. Can you think why? I'm going to tell you why, but I want to give you a second to think. Why would I want you to not say thank you or I'm proud of you when you're noticing all your child's efforts? You're welcome to throw it in the chat if you want to try to guess. The reason is, if I say thank you or I'm proud of you, who are you doing this stuff for? You're doing it for me. But if I've identified behaviors and I've made expectations clear, hopefully, actually, that I've asked you what you think, I've asked the child what they think the expectation should be, then they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So I don't want them to be doing it because it's because of me. I want them to do it because I'm recognizing that they're doing the things they're supposed to do. So here's the truth. We are waiting. We are waiting as parents and teachers and clinicians. We are waiting for our 2E kids who are in a totally different time frame trajectory. We're waiting for their limbic system to settle. We're waiting for their working memory to mature. We're waiting for their processing speed. We're waiting for brain maturation, which is at 25, guys. That's when brain maturation happens. Yep, we're waiting. And that's okay. It will happen. But remember what I said. The A1 number one thing is the relationship. The 2E kids are incredible antennae. They know when somebody gets them. They know when somebody's annoyed by them. I had a client's child once say, I either attract or repel people. I'm like a magnet. And he wasn't wrong. So my message to you is this 2E person in your life has a beautiful, complex mind. And there's nothing very simple about it. And so strategies and responses have to differ and have to be all of those things. Creative, include connection, concern, collaboration. So I'm going to give you 6 slides now that are going to kind of tell you how you can create and make your community more robust, how you can learn more, how you can connect with me. So on the screen, you see a QR code, and that is for my weekly newsletter called Gifted and Distractible. Every week is something different. The first week is my blog. The second week, I think, are articles. The third week, today, my vlog came out. And then we do sort of a roundup and some resources. So you're always welcome to subscribe, and it's free. I offer, as I said before, consulting, but I also offer a free 20-minute phone consultation. So there's the QR code there. I know this is going to be recorded, and I think you're going to receive it or have access to a link. So don't worry if you're not able to do this fast enough, but you can always go to withunderstandingcomescalm.com as well. This is what I referred to before that I gave this morning. So we're in the middle of a free online 2E adult masterclass, and there's not a lot of stuff out there for adults. So I'm very proud to be offering this and offering it for free. And whenever anybody joins, they're able to get the recordings from the past. So we're going to start week 3 next week. And the Haystack is our community for 2E adults, and we open enrollment 4 times a year, and our next enrollment's the end of May. And my book, you can get it anywhere you buy books. And social media, this is where I am everywhere. Basically, you can just look for Let's Talk 2E. I have different ones on Facebook, as you see there. And then With Understanding Comes Calm, my name, or 2E Adulting as well on Instagram. And with that, I will happily answer questions. How are we on time, Craig? We're good, yeah?
Oh, we're just fine. Yeah, I'm gonna actually go ahead and stop the recording right now, just so our questions aren't part of this. But
Okay.
are there any of the questions that were pre-submitted that you wanted to go over, or you felt? I know there were a bunch on middle school. I saw.
Yeah. So I'm gonna